Do not underestimate the talented and dedicated folks at CIG Audio. There's always a giant emphasis on video here, but none of it would ever hit the way that it's supposed to without that A to that V. And as we near the end of our show, we also saw the last of our community videos during the break, and I hope they stick around as a tradition for CitizenCons going forward. For those of you who know my origin story, you might understand why I have a particularly soft spot for them. But that's enough chat. This is it. We're at the end of our day. It's time for one more panel and one more panel alone. It's time for Tony, Rob, Ben, and Luke to take you deep into the machinery beneath our universe in systematic gameplay. Stream of thought. Bon appetit.
Hi, I'm Tony Zurovec, Director of Persistent Universe for Star Citizen. Today I'm going to tell you about some of the new technology, features, and content that we're aiming to deliver over the next several quarters, and how these things are going to impact your gameplay experience. To assist in that endeavor, I brought along a few others to give you some additional perspective, including SGS Assistant Director Rob Reininger, Senior Systems Designer Ben Dorsey, and over in the UK, Lead Designer Luke Presley. Rob, we've been able to buy and sell commodities for years, but we're now looking to try and close out the entire loop by the end of the year by allowing players to sell weapons, armor, clothing, and eventually ships back to the shops. One of your favorite aspects of this has always been what it means to treasure. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
I think it's huge because now it gives me a purpose to go out and collect the stuff, because players are very meticulous. They'll go out and pick up every single gun, weapon, armor off of other players. Like, loot generation is something that the Frankfurt team is working on. It means a lot for, investigating lockers or just stripping down something. We talk about salvage. These are all things that are working towards the ability to buy and sell items. But most importantly, it's just curating your inventory, right? It's getting rid of this stuff. It's another form of reward. So I think it's a huge addition to the game.
Sure, and it also plays a big role in character advancement, right?
Yeah.
Because you can realize the equity from items that you've purchased in the past. In other words, I buy a particular laser rifle. Now I decide that I want the better one. I don't have to buy that one starting from scratch. I can actually sell my original one, assuming it's in pretty good shape, and I basically pick the optimal shop at which to sell it. That's a shop that deals in that specific item. Then I can actually get a pretty good price for that used item. I can then take that money and apply it and the differential towards moving up the ladder and basically getting better and better stuff. And so just like in the real world, it's like you don't usually start from scratch and buy a house and then basically have to buy another one from scratch. You basically take your realized equity in your original and you throw it into the other one and you just pay the difference.
Yeah, and that's something that we don't have in the shops right now. Everything is in the shop on a per item basis. And items sometimes come with default loadouts on them, like a sniper rifle or a set of armor, or ships are a great example of something that comes with a default loadout of certain laser cannons and power plants and et cetera. So as we go forward with selling, one of the things that we want to do is get an itemized price for every single attachment that's on an item, which includes laser scopes, magazines, any underbarrel attachments, right? Things like that. So now that these have their own individual price, it's much easier for us to tune the economy. So now it's, this thing is more expensive or less expensive. As stats change, we can keep up with the statistical improvement of the item on a per item basis.
Sure, you have the macro item. It consists of the child items. We changed the price of the child item, and the macro item, the larger item that includes various quantities of this. Its price is automatically adjusted, which is not something that happens now and causes us countless problems.
Yeah, and it means that now we have less moving parts to worry about on a global basis. And from a what does the world have for sale in it? You talked about taking something to a shop that deals in those items. It's kind of the concept of, well, this shop deals in it and they refurbish it. They have an invested value in procuring those things back from people in the universe. So we want to encourage players to go around to the different places that have the best price for it, much like commodity trading, right? We want players to go here because they can buy it for the best price, go here because they can sell it for the most money. Same principle for selling items, right? So this shop deals in it. You should be able to go there and get more money for it.
Sure, and we need this more sophisticated method of determining the pricing of the more complicated items that are composed of lots of child items, partially because of what it means to selling. In other words, when I go to sell my my pistol, I may have a custom scope on it, something for which we don't have a specific entry in our global retail products list and that says this item should, if it were new, cost this much. This winds up becoming something to where, sure, we've got the base price of the pistol and we've got the base price of the scope, but we don't have any sense of what the combination is. As of right now, we don't have a means of solving that, and so this is why we are going to be pursuing changing even how the shops specify their default inventory. Like right now, we actually have shops specify every individual item that they can sell, as opposed to where we're going is it'll be classes of items. This this particular shop deals in in small handheld weapons from this particular manufacturer. Now, because they actually deal in small handheld weapons, they will in fact purchase small handheld weapons from a different manufacturer. Right. You just won't get quite as good a price because they're not as adept at repairing them, and they don't have a clientele that's that's geared towards purchasing those items, etc. If you wanted to realize the best possible price, then you would wind up taking your specific items to a shop that dealt in those specific things.
That's right.
And that's where, assuming the condition was perfect and assuming that the shop had a lot of cash on hand with which to procure these deals and so was willing to be a little bit more liberal, that's where you could potentially recoup 70, 80, 85% of your original value. Whereas if you go to someone that simply sure they deal in small arms, but not necessarily that that particular manufacturer, not that particular caliber weapon or whatever the case may be, then maybe you only get 40 or 50 cents on the dollar.
Exactly.
It's like when you're dealing with a car dealership. Like if you bring them their brand of car, they're going to pay you more for that than if you brought them something.
It's easier for them to service. Their mechanics are already familiar with it. They can do the work at cost.
They can sell it.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally makes sense.
It's big, and it's something that it just feels natural, right? It's how the world really works, and we want to continue to push that forward.
3.15 is a huge update to the game because of the localized inventory that's going to totally change the game. There are several aspects to this, and that starts with, I'd say, the personal inventory manager that Rich Tyrer and the actor feature team have put so much work into. They're going to cover that in a separate discussion, so we'll leave that out of here. Over on our side, we've got the vehicle loadout manager, which has been adapted to only allow you to modify vehicles that are in your immediate vicinity. And then we've also added a new mobiGlas app called Knickknacks. Reiniger, so you've spent the last couple of quarters heavily focused on this. Go ahead and walk us through what's changed, starting with the front end menu.
Yeah, so the front end, we've historically allowed players to kind of go wherever they want, right? But as we move forward with the game and the new player experience, we want players to be invested in their home location. So it's more of selecting a home base, because the inventory that you have at the start of your account that's entitled, through all your web purchases, through whatever, subscriber flares, etc. All of this stuff is going to go to that location as it's physicalized in the world. So now you have a home base of operations. That's your place. As we explore out throughout the universe, you may move some of that stuff to a new place as you get persistent halves here, a new hab over there, persistent hanger, right? Players are going to be tangibly going up to, interacting with their weapon rack, interacting with the stuff in their ship. And so localized inventory is a massive change to how they've dealt with the game up till now. Gone are kind of the days of this global inventory that you can go and interact with anywhere in the universe. If your stuff is at Microtech, you need to go to Microtech to do it. If it's in this hangar over here, you got to go to that hangar. So we want players to feel the pressure of prepping for a trip, right? It's as you go out, this is the mission I'm going to do. This is what I need to go and do that mission. So I want to go here, get this, or maybe go to a shop here and buy that. And so the front end is going to be the first step in kind of planting your seed wherever it is in the universe from the very start.
So what about the Knickknacks app? So this allows you to basically, in its first incarnation, to see where you've placed all of your loot throughout the entire solar system. It works on a hierarchical basis, so you can drill down into a particular planet, see the city. At the city, you can basically see what ships you have stored there. You can look within your ship and eventually see what cargo grids and what storage closets you have within there and what items you have placed within there. You've also got a number of filters that allow you to quickly drill down through your entire inventory and find all the laser rifles or whatever else it is that you're specifically searching for. Can you just walk through that in a little bit more detail?
As we kind of go into the localized inventory, the VMA can only act on the ships that are at that location. You kind of lose perspective of the global view because the personal inventory manager that the active feature team has done has removed the PMA, which was also your kind of global view into your personal items. So the Knickknacks app allows you to kind of see where your stuff is distributed around the world at the individual location level. So whether it's in a ship or in a hab or in a hangar, right now the locations are basically cities or stations. Pretty much any place that has a shop that sells items, that can be some place where you can store stuff. So the ships also have their local inventories associated with them, so you can store things in the ship. And the Knickknacks app is good because now if you want to find laser rifles, you can search by type or subtypes. Basically the same things that you see in the shop, so the categories that you see in the shop UIs. That's the same level of interaction and filtering that you'll have in Knickknacks.
We've spoken a bit about how it's going to evolve in the future and what new capabilities we would wind up adding to it. Trading with other players is one of the things that's at the top of the list.
Yeah, right-clicking on something, being able to say, hey, open a trade window with Ben here. I want to be able to show me on the star map where this is. So something that we want to do in the Mobiglize as a whole is context ability to bounce to different apps that are contextually relevant to whatever you're currently using. So
like saying this is in this location when that's just a string, like it's in Olisar, that's not super useful. Seeing that on a map, that tells me something. That tells me I need to go from here to here, I need to plot this location. Right. I'm gonna go through this dangerous area to get there in order to access my stuff.
Or a hyperlink on that.
And you can also very easily discern distance and stuff, which is, this one's not here, but is it relatively close or is it really, really far away? And I need to be able to obviously put that into my planning.
Yeah, or set a route to see how much fuel I'm going to use.
Exactly.
Right? There's a lot of different reasons why these things are kind of relevant. We want to try and preserve all those elements that CR really wants to push towards, but still give you the context switching that you're going to need.
Another area that's currently under heavy development is physicalized cargo. It consists of multiple facets and will be released in stages, with the first one relating to shop purchases injecting physical entities rather than what I would call render proxies into your ship. This is going to convey all sorts of benefits and advantages, to the gameplay experience. The first and one of the most obvious is simply the fact that now that you've got a ship that has physical entities placed within it, then when another player winds up disabling, boarding your ship, they can actually extract, that cargo from you. There's value there that they can actually take. Whereas right now, the only way to get that value is you have to, blow up the ship, and then we basically, create these cargo facsimiles that basically get blasted out into space, and you have to go collect those, et cetera. And so this starts to hint at things like, the fact that we're going to want to bring NPCs into defending these ships. So all of a sudden, you get this fantastic gameplay transition, what I would say, where you have ships doing this momentum-based combat, and now I can disable a ship, board it, and I actually have to overcome the NPC crew and then physically grab the cargo, haul it back to my ship. At the same time, you're concerned that while you're basically on the ship and lugging this stuff around, that security or allies of the ship that you've disabled might show up and start blasting you. And so all of a sudden, the considerations, just explode, for doing something so right now relatively basic. And it's one of the aspects that I really love about this game, which is how we can add this low-level gameplay mechanic, and in one shot, it's going to totally transform so many different elements of the game.
And we get stuff like the whole sea, which is another hurdle beyond the physicalization of cargo. I think one of the things that just physicalizing the cargo really does is it allows for the gameplay that CR wants, where you're not blowing up ships, right? You're destroying an engine, which is not a critical failure, right? Critical failures are the things that lead to these larger scale destructions, but on average, you're knocking a ship out of commission. You're able to board, you're able to acquire the stuff, you're not killing everybody on the ship just because it got taken down to 0 health, right? So these are all things that just physicalizing the cargo allows us to do.
You mentioned the Hull C. So the Hull C has some unique challenges related to attaching physicalized cargo to it when you're actually, docked at a station, or when you're, parked in a hangar and its wings are compressed. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the Hull C, because it does have these two different states, now we have ATC considerations. If I have cargo on the outside of my ship, my wings are exposed, now I can only go to a docking collar. I can't go to the hangar. So the ATC needs to know to route you to these different locations. Showing all this cargo on the outside of a ship beyond, think of adding additional ships to an area and the kind of, slowdown that you might see on a server, right? You're adding more physical objects that can be blown up, can be interacted with. So there's a technical challenge that we need to overcome as well. How they get on there, these are shipping container sized objects that have a real world weight to them. They need a tractor beam that is large enough, probably on an Argo ship, right? So you'll get these little transport ships going from a station's docking, a cargo bay, flying it out to the Hull C, and think of it as a person walking in and out, but it's on a spaceship scale.
Another thing that's really bothered me for quite a while is what I'd call the lack of transactional friction. And what I mean when I say that is that it takes the exact same amount of time to load or unload 1 unit of cargo onto your ship as it does 1,000 or 10,000. There's no friction, in this process. Right. And that's completely different from the real world, where mom and pop retailers and major port facilities, designed to rapidly load or unload, cargo onto, some big, freight ship, are able to move, much larger quantities in a much shorter period of time. And you've got skilled dock workers that, you can actually hire that are trained to basically deal with special types of materials and all that sort of stuff. Where we're eventually going with this is that shop purchases are going to inject physical cargo into a storage space, and it's then up to you, the player, to basically move the stuff from that storage space onto your actual ship. And there are going to be, I would assume that at this point in time, half of the people watching this are saying that sounds incredibly awesome, right? Yeah. And the other half are saying this sounds incredibly tedious, and it sounds like a lot of forced menial labor that's going to be completely completely right. lacking in fun. There is a method to the madness. I mean, where we're going with this is we're going to make the concept of moving freight onto and off of ships not just a logistical challenge, but we're actually going to make sure that it's a fun experience. Yeah. And this would include everything from eventually adding a service beacon so that you could recruit your friends, your org mates, people you don't know to basically come and help you move cargo. We'll eventually add the ability for NPCs to be hired at that location, and the price will fluctuate depending upon how many other players are requesting similar services. And you can use those types of capabilities if you simply want to pay a certain amount, have your ship loaded or unloaded, and you're going to go fly around and do something completely unrelated. So, Dorsey, how is physicalized cargo going to impact the gameplay experience?
I mean, in a bunch of ways. As you kind of touched on, there's the whole concept of needing to move cargo from one of those storage areas into that ship. We've actually run into a lot of problems where when you come across a derelict, for instance, we have all these crates on there that you can offload in a lot of the events that we've done. And that amount of time that it takes to do that makes it so that when you then go to sell those crates, they aren't worth the time, frankly.
It's
because
money over time.
Exactly. It is so much faster to just park your ship and click the button and have it instantly get filled, and then drive over to another place and have it instantly be unloaded, that we can't make that process pay well enough to also be balanced when you're getting 16 to 20 crates off of a ship, and it's taking you half an hour to do that. But once you make it so that there is a much more similar timeline between those two, you can make it so that there's a much bigger reward on a crate by crate basis, and that allows us to make it so that derelicts become a lot more common and offloading stuff becomes a lot more common. There's also just some really great benefits in that we can make missions reward you by putting cargo out there.
That's right.
Doesn't have to be that the UEC reward of a mission is the only reward. This mission gives you 5,000 every single time. No, there's a ship that gets blown up, or you blow up or disable a ship, and especially disable a ship, and then you can board it and take that cargo off. For pirates, that becomes then the goal. Like, blowing up a ship now becomes almost a failure. You don't want to. You want to disable it, you want to be able to get on it, and then you want to take that cargo off. And of course, the crew is going to be fighting you the entire way there. They're going to have their people to try and fight off your boarding parties. You've suddenly transitioned into an FPS map by doing so, which is this really great transition that just doesn't really happen in a lot of games, and that's amazing. And even just from a pure like gameplay system standpoint of carrying that crate, that is a very powerful state for the player to be in that they are vulnerable. You can't be shooting a gun and carrying a crate at the same time.
That's actually one of my favorite, things about this entire process is the fact that we're finally going to reward the player and basically provide this differential in the challenges.
Yes.
To where we've long had, blow the ship up, the ship basically ejects some cargo,
Right.
you tractor beam it up, and now you basically got your reward. But what it's missing is that transition from FPS from ship-based, momentum-based, combat to where you're shooting your big guns at these things, et cetera, and now you're sneaking around corners, and you may or may not try to be stealthy, and you're basically trying to extract the cargo out, and the crew's basically coming out of the security areas of the ship and patrolling for you and trying to stop
You also
you.
got friends trying to protect each other too, while the other people are trying to move stuff, right? And tractor beams are based on weight, so it may take multiple people to actually move a heavier box. And CR wants the gameplay experience to be less ships blowing up, more this ship got disabled, the engines go out, and unless there's a critical failure, the ship doesn't explode. So the opportunity to board a ship will be more common as we move forward.
There's one other thing I wanted to talk about in this area, and that's you've heard me talk about this often, which is eventually I want the whole transport occupation to kind of revolve around what I call like a hub and spoke model, right, to where you've basically got big port facilities that are specifically designed to provide the quantity of inventory and the and all of the infrastructure to quickly get that stuff on and off certain ships, as opposed to small mom and pop retailers that are really just intended to deal in a very small number of items. And one of the more significant problems we have in the game, because we don't yet have that level of realism, is related to we've got a small mom and pop retailer, and we need to have a decent amount of inventory so that it can satisfy demand across potentially 100 different players, all grabbing theoretically 1 or 2 or 3 items. But what happens in the real game right now, because there are none of these limitations, there's none of this transactional friction, is one big ship comes up and it purchases all 300 of them because it takes absolutely no time to do that. It then flies to a destination and it immediately sells it, and it collects only the slimmest of profit margins. But because there was no loading time, there was no unloading time, they can still turn around and make a fairly good return on the amount of invested time they put into it. And turning all of this cargo into physicalized entities and basically adding these logistical challenges to where you have to move stuff on, move it off, you have to be more careful with volatile cargo. Bigger crates will require Argos to move them, or cranes or forklifts or whatever the case may be. All of this is ultimately going to push players into being more selective about where, for whatever they're trying to do, what types of shops and stuff they're going to visit. And what you're going to get is just like in the real world, where you'll have super tankers bringing oil from across the ocean and basically parking it at some sort of port facility for offloading. And that will then be transported by, whether it's pipelines, by rail, by those types of things to distribution outlets. And from there, it'll be picked up by trucks and transported to the local gas station. And from the gas station, that's where you, the end consumer, can expect to buy 6 or 12 gallons of gas. But in the real world, you can't, drive your truck up to a port refinery on the coast and basically request 5 or 10 gallons of fuel. It's like they only deal in minimum quantities of 10 or 100,000 or 500,000 barrels of fuel, and this will be the same thing that we're going to eventually support on our side, to where if you've got one of these big whole sea ships and stuff, there will be specific locations where we're really basically pushing you to do your business. It doesn't mean that you can't go and park at a small place. It's like, I can have a super tanker and I can go park on the side
though, right? Because you do have the docking collar restriction on the whole sea type ship, right? But I think this is what the going to the per box model will actually do for us, because we can just make those small mom and pop shops only have the smaller volumes of commodities, right?
You talked about how if you can only unload and offload one box at a time, I'm not going to do a Caterpillar there.
Yeah,
like, there's
why would I
nothing
do that, right?
stopping you, but there's something.
That's just
stopping
it. If my
sense
ship
says no.
holds 10,000 units of inventory and I don't have any of the automated stuff, and you don't have enough dock workers, I can't hire at this place. There literally aren't 100 NPCs or 500 NPCs that I can hire for any amount of money. They're literally just not there. Then you're going to have to do it yourself, or you're going to have to request some friends to help you, and it's simply too tedious. It's not that we literally prevent you from basically going there and extracting the material. It's that it's simply not going to be worth your time. You're going to have to invest so much time and effort into doing that all of a sudden you would need an astronomically high profit margin. And long before the profit margins on that particular commodity or material get that high, someone else with a smaller, more efficient ship that can more effectively be loaded with a smaller quantity of stuff and navigate to to another small location to basically sell it, they'll wind up taking that material from that location.
Which means for one of those bigger ships, like one of the Hull series or something, you're going to want to, by just that nature, go to a place that has a cargo elevator that can give you 20 giant crates at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That's
like with
where you'll make that profit.
With the infrastructure, it's like some places you'll have an elevator that basically gives you easy access to 10 crates at a time, and a bigger facility will have 50, and a bigger one still will have 200, and this one will allow you to basically hire up to 4 NPCs, and one NPC can move 10 crates per hour. But you're going to be in competition with with that smaller of NPCs with everybody else, so the price can get fairly high. And this other place will have up to 500 or 1,000 workers that you can hire. So it may still take it may take hours, but you have but that's only because you're loading 10,000 or 100,000 SEU of cargo into your hold. Another very interesting aspect of this is going to be that you're going to have relatively clearly delineated transport routes, supply routes within the system. And this provides us an awesome opportunity to more precisely tailor what types of challenges you should run into when you're basically moving a big freighter ship from point A to point B as opposed to this other location. In other words, if you think about pirates are trying to, abscond. They're basically trying to disable your ship and, and plunder it. Take, whatever valuable materials you have on board. But the types of ships that would be required to extract, all of the fuel off of a big, massive freighter are clearly dramatically different than the ships that would be needed to effectively and efficiently, plunder a far smaller ship that deals in a totally different, type of item, or a totally different, and more limited quantity of items. And so we'll be able to more accurately tailor the gameplay experience so that you get the kinds of challenges you would expect.
Well, and I think by nature, it'll allow it to naturally separate, right? Because it's not worth it over here, and we can make those inventory volumes smaller to match the type of people that we want frequenting those stores. I'm just not going to waste my time. As a large-scale shipper, I'm going to go to the bigger places that can handle it, that can get me in and out faster, that I can hire more people, where there's going to be other people there that I can potentially hire, like the service beacon. It doesn't matter if I'm out in the middle of nowhere, because nobody's there to come
that have the specialists. It's only at these select ports where they actually have trained dock workers skilled in in moving volatile cargo. And if you go to a place where you don't have it and you have, Joe average, NPC try to do it, then you may wind up, suffering the consequences of, oh, you lost your cargo, it was blown up, your ship was destroyed, you have to go to insurance, reclaim, et cetera, et cetera. All because you basically tried to, use a facility that was not appropriate for for the types of actions you were trying to do.
It's not tailored to it, right? So it's I think it'll be a good change for the game.
The key point from my perspective, though, is as much as possible, we don't want to necessarily make it black and white, right? Which is, it's not that you literally, as the owner of a whole sea, you're not able to buy fuel here. It's more that you can buy it there, but it's going to, if you're buying more than 10 or 20 units of it, it's going to be, you're going to basically have to deal with the repercussions of trying to get all of that stuff onto here. And it's going to take a tremendous amount of time, and you're going to wind up having to pay an exorbitant premium because you're basically going to be depleting them of their entire inventory supply, et cetera. And so it's really just the logistical challenges that you would face trying to exploit non-optimal locations for the unloading or for the loading or unloading of your cargo would simply not be worth it.
Well, and I think another good point is that as you push the inventory to its limits, your bid-ask spread is going to actually be going down as price per unit of the cargo is going to diminish as you get closer and closer to the inventory limits. So it's going to encourage you to go to places with those larger scale inventories so that you can keep your profit margin as high as possible.